Try to keep up. We are on the move here at the Voice of College Football. This is our weekly recruiting and portal update live show. So pull up, settle in, and leave those comments and questions. LeeAnn Herring right next to me, of course. And you can catch LeeAnn's work best right here on Twitter and on X to keep up with everything that she's got going on. And LeeAnn, appreciate you being here and, of course, making this all go for us.
Well, it's always good when we're on the move. There's definitely recruiting is back, even like we said, Mark, during the quiet period. There's not much quiet period anymore that there is less about dead period. It was a big recruiting weekend across the board, but it was an extremely big recruiting weekend out in the Carolinas. We talked a little bit about last week about Bill Belichick setting quite the stage this past weekend down in Chapel Hill, but Dabo Sweeney is the talk of the town. Clemson had a monster weekend. We're going to be talking a little bit about how that weekend went. They had not one but five commits commit this weekend down over in Clemson. There are plenty high profile guys. It was all, like I say, Mark, you can't get it done without the big guys up front. And it was a monster weekend in the Carolinas for the offensive and defensive linemen, really trying to see. But again, Bill Belichick, Dabo Sweeney having a heck of a time as far as the recruiting weekend. We're going to talk a little bit more about the intel we got from there. Of course, we got a little bit of the coaching carousel. Hasn't really been a lot going on, but a huge hire down, not in Bowling Green, Kentucky, but down in Bowling Green, Ohio, bringing in former Ohio State legend and Heisman Trophy winner. We'll start up with that. Of course, like it should be no surprise. It's that time of the year as these kids get out on the camp circuit. The ratings, the star power, it just keeps getting bigger. And Keyshawn Henderson, it should be no surprise that another top recruiting services has officially given him that fifth star, as if we needed any more solidification in how he continues to separate himself as not just an elite athlete, but more so as a high caliber quarterback. So we're talking a little bit about that. And of course, we can't complete out any show without the recruiting rumblings. Big, huge weekend down in NOLA for all the Southern prospects down at Edna Carr at another Under Armour next camp. And a lot of big buzz, of course, a lot of high profile names that we're going to talk about. But you know me, always liking to highlight those guys that really stood out, those gems. And hopefully here soon in a couple of minutes, we'll be joined by one of the guys that really stood out to me, two-way lineman right here from the SIP in Lamarcus Jones out of Callaway High School. Now, he's not a 2026, but he is a 2027, but he really did make some waves this weekend. So we look forward to talking. Ole Miss, of course, was one of his first offers and remains at the top of his list. So definitely Rebels are excited to watch. Always good to see the in-state talent. So plenty to talk about, Mark. So let's get to it.
Yeah, we see people filtering in, and I'm guessing most of you are on Twitter. So you can join us on YouTube, and there you can make your comments and questions known. So please follow the link to catch up with the show on YouTube, and you can join in the conversation as well. So you mentioned Bowling Green. So me being an Ohio guy, of course, when I hear Bowling Green, I think of Ohio first, but I do understand across the nation, most people go Bowling Green, Kentucky. So I get it, but they do play football in the MAC with the Falcons of Bowling Green. And the connection here with the recruiting is interesting because Eddie George may not necessarily resonate with a lot of 17-year-olds because it's been a while since he's been on the football field for the Tennessee Titans. But with their parents, I think they know his credibility as a top shelf NFL running back. He did a heck of a job at the FCS level as a head coach. So Eddie George going to Bowling Green brings a lot of cachet to that program.
I think, like you said, the young guys may not necessarily know who he is, but again, their parents and the connection that he brings, of course, returning to Ohio, where he set all sorts of records in the state during the 1995, capturing that Heisman Trophy for Ohio State. Like you said, he's made up the reins in the NFL career, but most notoriety recently, of course, being the head coach over at Tennessee State for the last 4 seasons, where he really took the program like many of these other tier schools that we don't hear a lot about and really just built them from the ground up. Of course, finishing over there at Tennessee Tennessee State with a 24-22 record. And again, he inherited a program that, a legend like him, being ingrained from the NFL, and of course Ohio State not having the luxuries, but really built it from the ground up. Of course, um, it was kind of, hearing in some of the interviews and conversations that he had about, Urban Meyer calling him. Of course, we know the ties that Urban Meyer has towards Bowling Green, and Bowling Green's kind of been one of those programs that really has just been a catapult for legends to kind of be bred out. And George's return, I think, will definitely bring a lot to the table. Again, he's not inheriting another, silver spoon kind of program. He definitely has his work cut out for them there in Ohio. But I think that when you talk to George and kind of hear what he's been talking about, he's just trying to get the program back up to what he did, similar to what he did during his time as head coach at Tennessee State, but just trying to get them across the finish line. We see in this day and age of programs that these programs like Bowling Green are really becoming somewhat of a developmental kind of feeder for some of the big programs. And I think that, of course, what George brings to the table, I suspect that this is what Bowling Green is not only going to try to make it in the, a run for it in the MAC, but also get its players ready, to maybe rise up the ranks, so, similar to what he's done in this past. So again, now Bowling Green was supposed to start their spring practices this Wednesday, but it's going to be delayed with the hire as George tries to finalize his staff. So it's really interesting to see who's going to be following Eddie George. I suspect with all the names in his black book that he has some good selections probably coming in at coordinator. So similar to what we saw, Deion Sanders do at Colorado. I suspect that Eddie George is going to bring some high-profile names in here to help develop these guys and have Bowling Green make a run at the map.
You mentioned Urban Meyer. It's interesting that he's got a connection with Eddie George on two different levels. Of course, Bowling Green was Urban Meyer's first head coaching job after he left Notre Dame as an assistant. And then that launched, of course, one of the most successful careers in the history of college football. But he turned around Bowling Green like on a dime. First season, boom. They won 10 games and he was off and running. And then the Ohio State connection, of course, Urban Meyer and Eddie George there. And I just think that Bowling Green's landed in a great spot here. To lose your head coach in February going into March, Scott Loeffler leaving for the NFL is a difficult position to be in. And for them to be able to find an Eddie George to fill that spot is a great turnaround for them. And it's been a good program. They went 6-2 in the MAC last year, won 7 games and went to a bowl game. So Bowling Green looking to compete in the MAC, and they'll have a household name within college football and NFL circles to be able to do that. And as we finish up the conversation on Eddie George, we do have our special guest stopping by. So we want to welcome LaMarcus Jones of Callaway High School
Hey, how you
with
doing?
us. LaMarcus, it's good to see you. How you doing
Good,
today?
I'm good. How about you?
We are doing well.
Doing it. Thank you so much for coming on, short notice. I know you had a big weekend. Of course, you guys are getting ready for off-season football down back in the SIP out at Callaway out on Jackson. But I know, LaMarcus, you had a huge weekend out at the Under Armour camp in NOLA. I hadn't had a chance to give the introduction just from watching your film, but of course, I was talking to Coach Reggie last night, and man, I think a lot of people always talk about the talent down in the SIP, but I think that when you guys get to go to these spring camps, much I'm sure like you experienced and you'll talk about that. I mean, it just really gives you guys a chance to highlight the skill that you had. I mean, uh,
Yes, ma'am.
you're a two-way lineman, tall, big framed. I mean, you were one of the most consistent guys on the offensive line that I saw all weekend. You definitely were
Thank you.
competing with some of the guys that are already ranked and have all that thing, have all that ahead going from you. I know that you're a 2027, so you still have a little bit of time to go on to your recruitment. But I know that after this camp, LaMarcus, you definitely are going to be creating some buzz. So definitely glad to bring you on and talk with you and kind of share, what your experiences was like at Under Armour camp and just kind of go from there.
It was great. I was glad to be able to compete with some of the best players in the country.
And what you went against some high profile names, some of the best, not only to come out of Mississippi, Louisiana, Georgia, especially, and I know that you got a chance that you were a two-way lineman. During this Under Armour camp, kind of when you're talking to coaches and everything, do you see yourself, or do they see yourself at, one side of the line that you might play stronger at, or one that you feel like you're going to be recruited at a better level, during your college recruitment?
No, ma'am, I feel like I can play both sides of the ball in high school and in college.
You still, like I said, you're a 2027, but definitely catching the eyes. I know that if you're an Ole Miss Rebel fan, they were one of the first programs to throw down a top offer. Can you talk a little bit about, Ole Miss and how some of the recruitment, or how that recruitment's going, and also maybe some of the schools that you're interested in, or, kind of looking at as far as your recruitment?
Ole Miss has been great. I plan on going down for a visit March 22nd.
Are there
And
any other program? Are there any other programs, Lamarcus, that you're kind of interested in, that you would like to take a visit, maybe that haven't put out the offer yet? But I think definitely after watching how you performed this weekend, you definitely are on their radar. Any other schools aside from Ole Miss, maybe outside Mississippi, or that you might be interested or thinking about maybe taking some visits?
yes, ma'am, I think about going to Georgia, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Arkansas State, Georgia Tech, and many more.
That, well, like I said, you definitely have a long list of, suitors, and definitely, like I said, after this weekend, Lamarcus, it's no question that you definitely will be going up the ranks as one of the top, offensive linemen. Um, I always get excited when I watch film, and when I was talking to Coach Reggie last night, it's always great to see one of our guys here, in the state of Mississippi definitely represent. Um, kind of take us through, we talk so much about the intangibles being a scout, coaches that, programs are looking for, but can you kind of talk about like what you've been doing this off season? Because like I said, when you go to Under Armour camps, you're with the best of the best, trying to, like I say, separate yourself. What are some of the things that you've been focused on and working on this off season, really just to kind of, make your stock rise and really take people, let coaches take notice, saying like, here, LaMarcus Jones is here, and I may not have stars, I may not have offers, but man, I'm coming to work.
First and foremost, I have heart. I've been working in the weight room. I've been working on my technique and my footwork.
Awesome. So you think, is, like I said, when let's go back to Ole Miss, because like I said, they've really been one of the ones that have kind of pushed the offer. Coach Garrison obviously on the offensive line, and then Randall Joyner, on the defensive line and defensive front recruiting you. Have they kind of shared with you kind of where they see maybe the Rebels would be looking at you? Or do you intend to be a two-way player? I know obviously in the high school circuit, with your size and your strength, it's only natural that you play both ways. But as far as Ole Miss, or have they kind of told you maybe which direction they're leaning on recruiting you more?
No, man, actually, I haven't met or talked to the offense and defensive line coach yet. I plan on talking to them when I go on my visit. The only coach I have talked to is Coach Bowden.
Excellent, excellent. And so again, you're still a ways off, but what are you most looking for in your next home, your future program, LaMarcus, aside, football, and maybe outside of football, that you're really looking for, that's going to help with your decision when that time comes?
I want a place that feels like home, a place that's going to push me to do better, a place that's going to stay on me no matter how hard I'm working, whether I'm slacking or not.
Love it. Well, Mark, you've kind of from the outside looking in, how we always like to, those gems, those under the radars. Anything you got for LaMarcus that you kind of want to talk about?
Well, Lamarcus, I got to say, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you taking the
Thanks for
time.
having me.
Also, I got to say, focusing on your offensive line play first and foremost, we think of offensive line play as being super physical in the run game, but not in the pass game. As an offensive tackle in the pass game, just basically that you have to, of course, extend your arms, keep the defender off of you, have great footwork as you get into your back pedal to set up in the pocket and all those things. And we think of it more as a finesse situation in the pass game. but I'm noticing you are driving guys. You are playing aggressive and physical, even in the pass game. And you don't see that very often out of offensive linemen. There's even a pass play on your huddle tape where you're driving a guy into the bench on a pass play. And that's just super impressive.
Thank you.
So what are we standing at here? I know that when we as scouts, they kind of say, well, he's at 6'6" or he's at 6'5", but give us your stats there, because like I said, I mean, I was looking at some of your tape from Under Armour this weekend. I mean, you just swallowed up some of the big defenders that were on you on those one-on-one, LaMarcus. It was just super impressive. I mean, you were just anchoring down on that line, but for coaches out there looking for some offensive linemen and defensive guys that can play both ways, give us those updated stats, because we want to hear it from you, not those, well, I'm eyeballing test kind of thing. But what are our stats right now as far as height and weight and all that good stuff?
I'm currently 6'6". I weigh 296.
Excellent. So coaches out there, like I'm telling you, look at his tape. If you guys don't know, LaMarcus Jones, 2027 offensive tackle, but also plays that defensive line. Get out there, because like I said, this weekend LaMarcus really super impressed me. I know there was a lot of high profile names at that Under Armour camp, but man, you really jumped out. So again, thank you so much for being on the show. We look forward to having you on in the future and keeping on with your recruitment. But again, coaches, get to know 2027 LaMarcus Jones out of Callaway High School in Mississippi. Big things ahead for him.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, LaMarcus. We appreciate it. The best of luck, and we know that you'll make a great decision. It's an exciting time, obviously, for you, and we wish you all the best and know that you'll make a great decision and have a great career.
Yes, sir.
All right, LeeAnn, thank you so much again for lining us up with another top prospect coming up the ranks for 2027.
It's exciting, and I'm so glad that you brought that up about his film. Like I said, I only got to watch a little bit of clips, on LaMarcus, and what I was really impressed by is just like he just turned it on and turned it up. He stood on business, as I like to say. But what did he say? 6'6", 296, and he's only 297, and not a 2027 kid who definitely can put some weight on. But like you said, we talk about how offensive linemen, offensive tackles especially, operate in certain aspects of the game. But like you said, he was taking guys left and right. And I really think on the one-on-one this weekend, some of the taller defenders, some of the more well-known defenders that are really out there that are ranked with the stars and everything, he really just swallowed them up all weekend long. And the one thing about the Under Armour NOLA camp that I really love is that it really puts kids like LaMarcus, I believe, on the map. Will Eckel, some of the names that we've been talking about, this past couple seasons and stuff, they've really made their mark during this weekend in Under Armour camps in NOLA, because like I said, it's a lot of talent basically out of Mississippi, Louisiana, Georgia, and Texas and some other schools. But it's really time for the Southeast talent, especially in Mississippi, to really take front and center. So again, coaches, LaMarcus Jones, 2027 two-way lineman, has a bright future ahead of him. But again, I'm really excited. I think he really competed well amidst a high for group of competitive defensive guys. So again, another JJ Pegues in the making. I didn't get a chance to ask him if he also takes snaps and routes, but again, when you come to these Mississippi players, especially out of Callaway, especially some of these schools where they don't have the luxury of having a lot of talent as far as depth rosters, you see guys like LaMarcus Jones, playing what I like to call Iron Man football. They step in, both sides. Sometimes even in special teams or and other things. So again, LaMarcus Jones, I think, is a name to watch, Mark, throughout this recruitment season. So get on board. Hopefully we'll be hearing more from him. Like you said, he's going to hopefully be making a visit to Ole Miss. But again, another unranked lineman. But again, talent, I think in this one will prevail, despite him not having those stars in that offer list. This is, I think, going to be a turning point for LaMarcus Jones in his recruitment. So watch out.
Definitely a name that we will be hearing more about, because we've heard a lot about him from the past, and we can't seem to shake the name of Keyshawn Henderson, who just seems to be collecting stars and attention from a very well-known coach out west.
It's definitely a new era in H-Town. The Cougars definitely, Willie Fritz, looking to turn the table, of course, not having the ideal season they did this past year. So, really bringing in some different coordinators, especially at the offensive coordinator in LSU, Slades Nagel, who has had a strong of course, we know that Nagel was with Willie Fritz, when he did that flip over in Tulane, and Keyshawn Henderson has spoken very highly not only of Coach Fritz, but also of Nagel having that relationship with him. But again, while it's still a little bit of ways to 2026 and Keyshawn Henderson makes his way down to Houston, um, everybody in their mother is trying to recruit him. And of course, he was named to 247 Sports, earning that fifth star that we knew was coming. Every time you see his talent, he has just grows and continues to impress. I think that anybody that ever questioned the fact that could he be converted to a strong caliber wide receiver safety, as most other schools were recruiting. But again, Willie Fritz and that recruiting staff did an excellent job, saying, hey, we want you to not only represent for your hometown, but we're going to recruit you at the position you want to play, despite him being an elite prospect at other positions. uh, you know I think the biggest thing for Houston, we saw that they're having to rebuild. This past season, we saw them take a big step defensively, but unfortunately, in Fritz's first season, the offense just wasn't shaking up to way it's supposed to be. It really did have it just really was a downfall collapse. I think 118th in the nation offensively. Just after finishing 2 seasons of being ranked 12. I mean, when you first talked about Houston before the Willie Fritz era, Dana Holgerson being at the reins at that, you just talked about the explosiveness that Houston talent is. So, I think this off season, Houston, starting with Keyshawn Henderson, as they say, the key to the city. It has to lie with Keyshawn Henderson. But in his popularity, in so many things, he remains loyal to Houston. But of course, with his high profileness, his talent, it's only natural that all the programs we've talked about it day in and day out that are trying to get in his good graces, trying to get official visits. And of course, it should come as no surprise that Coach Prime is looking, and that we're hearing that Keyshawn Henderson is not only very high on his quarterback board, but just high overall in that 2026 recruiting class, and is really trying to build a strong relationship, getting Henderson, to get on an official and take some trips out to Boulder. So that is going to be an interesting recruitment to watch. And Keyshawn Henderson has been nothing but transparent to the media, saying, you know what, I'm committed, I'm loyal to Houston. I like what Willie Fritz is doing. I have a strong relationship with Slade Nagel. Now, does that mean I'm not going to go look at other places and look at it as a business approach and see what they can offer? No, absolutely not. He's going to entertain those ideas. But again, he remains steadfast at Houston. So again, earning that fifth star, as if we needed any more confirmation. But again, he's got that fifth star, looking to build at H-Town. So again, it's going to be an interesting recruitment to watch to see if Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, can make some segue. But we're looking at that footage that, like I said, this was really Keyshawn Henderson's coming out. For those of us that didn't recruit, that weren't able to see him outside of his Texas roots at Legacy Sports and Science School in Houston, this was definitely the moment that really solidified that there was something special about Keyshawn Henderson, not just as an athlete, but as a quarterback.
Absolutely. And when LeeAnn points to Keyshawn Henderson's ability at safety and at wide receiver as a freshman playing at that level of high school football, 74 catches, 1,100 yards, 14 touchdowns, and then he switches to quarterback the next year and takes off from there with 21 touchdown passes in only 8 games as a junior, 25 touchdown passes, and then we saw him on display there as the Navy All-American Bowl MVP, hitting on 3 of 5 with that touchdown pass, 146 yards. And so when the lights were brightest, he was showing up and showing out, as we see right there. Keyshawn Henderson drawing offers from all over the place, committed to Houston currently, but Deion Sanders is lurking. All right. Next up on the list, LeeAnn, we've got, another Bill Belichick check-in. what he's got cooking there in North Carolina, of course, has to do with a lot of high-level prospects.
Well, the Carolinas in general, like we said at the top of the show, from Bill Belichick at Chapel Hill to Clemson, South Carolina with Dabo Swinney, there was probably of all the places hosting big recruiting weekends, after this dead period heading into the quiet period. Remember, with quiet period, visits are happening, except they are happening on college campuses, so of course, that these programs, after a month of pretty much being dormant as far as visits, they were high profile visitors all over the Carolinas. So we're going to kick it off. Like I said, the Bill effect was one of probably, I don't think that Bill Belichick and his recruiting staff in their first season could have set a better ideal moment. Of course, most of the recruits taking in that rivalry game, with Duke being there, Lawrence Taylor, Julius Peppers, Drake May, shaking hands, recruits were there, getting to talk about their experience. It was just this, like I said, Bill Belichick couldn't have written a better storyline all weekend. We talked about, I kind of chimed in when you did that late night Saturday show about some of the buzz. We had some of our UNC Voice of College Football fans kind of talking about. We talked about one guy that I really am interested to watch. We mentioned some of the guys, of course, the blue chip elite edge rusher duo that was down there, Cardo Meadows, Luke Waffle. Nothing but good things. Everything that we kept hearing that all the recruits were saying across the board, there was just no experience like it. Getting to, talk with Lawrence Taylor and all these legends, being surrounded by that. Of course, the basketball atmosphere, as much as we don't think that, during college, the off season of college football, but March Madness really does help recruiting, this atmosphere, this environment. We saw a lot of recruits just talking about how they were impressed. It felt like an NFL experience, just excited to be in the company of a coach like Bill Belichick. But like I said, kind of going back forward, there was everybody that was there could have been there as far as elite. But there's one in particular guy that I think that we need to watch. It could be on Flip Watch. I kind of mentioned it on that late night show, is Texas A&M commit. We've talked about how well Texas A&M commit has just been elite when it comes to recruiting, but unfortunately, despite the groundwork that Jimbo Fisher kind of laid with that recruiting class a couple seasons ago, and now Mike Elko, we just haven't really seen Texas A&M being able to translate it. And even though they've got a hefty amount of commits, they definitely are looking to test the waters. And Texas A&M commit Treshawn Ruffin was out in Chapel Hill this weekend. We're hearing he just had a really amazing experience. He said that even though we know what kind of atmosphere you can get down in College Station, the electricity of Kyle Field, Ruffin shared that he just never felt anything like that, no energy like that in a day in his life, was what he was talking about. So again, that's going to be an interesting commitment to watch, as far as if Bill Belichick after this weekend will be able to definitely get in the way of Treshawn Ruffin and possibly put some thoughts in his head about maybe coming down to USC. But again, high caliber guy right there from North Carolina. Again, this would be another huge flip for Bill Belichick. Obviously, an elite talent out of North Carolina, top defensive lineman. This would be a huge win if they were able to get him back out of the Lone Star State, back into North Carolina. But again, Treshawn Ruffin, all nothing but saying what an electric. He never felt anything like that. So this is definitely a recruitment that we're going to be watching out in Chapel Hill. But I definitely think that Treshawn Ruffin left Chapel Hill, of course, not too far from where he resides in North Carolina, with a lot of questions that maybe he might be taking his services closer to home.
We rarely see a player from North Carolina go to Texas A&M, but let's keep in mind, Mike Elko was there at Duke for 2 years. I got to think that the relationships that he built throughout the state may have had something to do with this. But again, he's going to have to hold on to Mr. Ruffin for the next 6 months until National Signing Day and keep Bill Belichick away. And that may be easier said than done.
And before we move on to the Clemson that was definitely cooking, some other names that to watch. Of course, we know that Ole Miss has been highly, highly in pursuit of Landon Duckworth. He has seemed to be the quarterback for that 2026 class that the Rebels and Lane Kiffin been high up in. Well, they definitely are going to have some work cut out for them because, of course, Landon Duckworth was another quarterback that was down visiting Bill Belichick and that electric atmosphere. So that's definitely going to be an interesting recruitment to watch. Of course, we know that Landon Duckworth has not only been highly coveted quarterback from his class, but of course, his partner in crime, running back Xavier Crowell, has become one of the top running back prospects in the country. So a lot of these programs that have been interested in Landon Duckworth services have also been trying to, you know, kind of get in the good graces of Xavier Crowell. So this will be another interesting one to watch, just how Lane Kiffin and his recruiting staff will counter a strong weekend for Landon Duckworth out in Chapel Hill. And like we say, as much as a lot of these programs want to look outstate, there were two very big in-state talents that I want to make mention of that were in Chapel Hill. Offensive linemen, like I said, it was all about the offensive and defensive linemen. And even though it may not be Ole Miss on that recruiting trail, when you hear about the offensive linemen and defensive linemen just getting the center of attention at these recruiting events, it helps me make excited. But definitely Bill Belichick's got to be excited that he was able to get two of their top in-state coveted linemen in JB Shabazz and Akeem Ojiboko. Sorry if I chopped that, but those are two headlining guys on that offensive line. But again, a strong weekend as expected for Bill Belichick in his first season down in Chapel Hill. Again, we've read the headlines about if this was the right hire, if this was going to be the right fit. But again, from all the things that we're hearing from prospects across the board that we're able to take in Chapel Hill, they just feel that the energy is extremely different. It's really Bill Belichick, of course, brings a ton of experience, and just the way he approaches things has really got a lot of the top recruits really interested in making visits. So there's some interesting characters, like I said, and prospects to watch in these next couple weeks to see. Like I say, we follow the official visits, but those unofficial visits. So I suspect after this weekend, we may be seeing some of the nation's top prospects that have been being heavy favorites on some other boards be making their way to Chapel Hill after this weekend again.
Talking about coming in droves, that's been Clemson over the last few days, no doubt about that. And before you run down the list, and I'll have some things to say about Clemson's moves in recruiting, I will say that I caught the Grant Wise commitment and his interaction with Dabo Sweeney, and that was one of those fun deals where he tried to play it sly and cool and tried to trick the Clemson coaching staff, and then all of a sudden he let him know that he had committed, and Dabo just gave him a big old bear hug and slapped him on the back and said, "This is my man, this is my man." And so they were happy to get one Grant Wise, but he's only one of many. I think the list is 5 that Clemson was able to pull in here recently, and we're talking about some top-notch players.
Clemson has 2 major recruiting weekends throughout the season. Dabo Sweeney finally bit the bullet and recruited in that transfer portal. We knew that would eventually be coming, but talk about a big weekend in Death Valley. Sorry, LSU fans. They definitely, the Death Valley that was on primetime special this weekend was down in Clemson, South Carolina. Dabo Sweeney not nailing 1, not nailing 2, but inking 5 of the nation's top linemen in the country. And, usually when you hear about high profile recruitments, we're talking wide receivers, we're talking edge rushers, but to see 3 of the nation's top offensive linemen, 2 elite offensive tackle and Chancellor Barkay, another elite tackle, Adam Guthrie, one of the top guys, like you said, that you just talked about, interior offensive lineman Grant Wise, and then one of the top wide receivers in the country in Nareem Burrows. When you look at Burrows, I had a chance to kind of look at some of their film really quickly, but going back to the wide receivers in the Naeem Burrows, he's just one of the most electric and eclectic pass catchers coming out of Florida. And then rounding out the class was Connor Salmon. Talk about inking just a win on that offensive line. You have that protection up front in the interior, addressing all those needs. But then you come up, but not with one, but two of the nation's top wideouts. Like I said, Connor Salmon, one of the fastest guys that I've seen coming out of the Bullis School in Virginia. Of course, we know that it's a long way till signing day. And while these guys have given their verbal commit, especially when it comes to that wide receiver room with Naeem and Connor, there's some schools that are definitely still going to be lurking, especially for Connor Salmon out of the Bowl School in Virginia. Some schools to watch, despite his verbal commitment to Dabo Swinney this past weekend. Obviously, Notre Dame, Penn State, Maryland, and Virginia Tech have been some of the schools that we hear are going to remain vigilant and still trying to recruit. But again, it was a huge weekend. And like I say, it's like a ripple effect. When the dominoes start to fall to place, when commitments start coming, you kind of see, and other programs start making moves or on the move, it changes how recruits see that program. So, a huge weekend with monster commits. I mean, especially coming off during a quiet period. This is kind of not a typical thing you definitely see. Usually you see a big chunk of commitments come as the in the later part during the May and June season, when we have camps and we see after spring ball. But like I said, for Dabo Swinney to make, get 5 verbal commitments from, across the board from some of the nation's best says a lot about something. But, just kind of going over what some of these guys were kind of sharing, why Clemson, why be on lock with them right now, is they just really like what Clemson is trying to get back to. But one of the things that really caught my attention, and we've always known, Dabo Swinney has really always been an upfront coach, especially about his faith. And a lot of these recruits talked about how they just love the fact that he was so open about the closeness, about his relationship with his faith and with God. And that really was an integral part why a lot of these recruits, outside the obvious football variables that went into it. But that was really something refreshing to hear across the board, that, despite the criticism Dabo Swinney has got as far as the way he's approached his program, or possibly Clemson not being that winning school that it once was, but it looks like they're well on their way back here. And when you come off, Mark, with a big recruiting weekend such as Clemson has, probably, really itching its way to probably being one of the top recruiting classes in 2026, it catches the eyes. And 2 guys and 2 recruitments that the Clemson Tigers are really looking at, that really could have been swayed this weekend, of course, is the number 1 linebacker in the country, 5-star Tyler Atkinson out of Grayson, Georgia. They have been battling for him. Of course, Georgia trying to keep him in state, and some other Power 4 programs. So we're going to be interested to see how this weekend and how it played out, and how this visit will affect how that recruitment goes. And a guy that everyone's talked about, and I've had the opportunity to see, at the Navy All-American game, who would have figured, is the number 2 interior offensive lineman in Darius Gray out of St. Christopher's. Again, he's one that they are really looking at, of course, making his visit. Good note that they will both be back on May 30th for their officials, and some schools to watch, especially Mark, in that Gray recruitment. Again, he's one of the best interior linemen in the country out of St. Christopher's, is LSU. He's had a really good relationship with LSU. He talks about the Bulls and Michigan. So again, the Clemson and Dabo Swinney, while they've had a top recruiting weekend, inking some of the best offensive tackles, they're still trying to fill some voids with that linebacker position and that interior lineman position. So definitely look for Tyler Atkinson and Darius Gray to see how those visits go for their official back on the 30th of May.
Burrows hauled in 34 touchdowns in his first 36 varsity games. He has been a part of a couple state championship track teams on the 2A level. Also led the 2025 Under Armour All-America game in receiving yards as an underclassman. So excellent get for Clemson at wide receiver, of course, there. And, big picture here would be, obviously, about 10 to 12 years ago, Dabo Swinney put the finishing touches on the elevation of Clemson football from where he took it over in 2009 to a national championship game run in 2015. Then they closed it out with a win over Bama to win it all in 2016, 4 national championship games, 2 crowns in 4 years. And the transfer portal connected with NIL, connected with schools that seem to have quite a bit more resources, has been what's been looked at as the downfall of Clemson football. They've remained competitive on a conference level. They won the ACC last year, but they have not been able to. And of course, recruiting was the lifeblood and was the number one factor in them elevating to national championship status. But they never recruited with Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. They were never a top 3 recruit level program, but they were always in that 8 to 10 range, and they were able to supplement that with excellent coaching and development and build championship teams. And now they've fallen off a bit, and people have, thrown another nail in the coffin on Dabo Swinney, thinking that they would never be able to recover in this day and age because of his approach. Well, the recent evidence would fly in the face of that. So Dabo has counterpunched, and it looks hopeful for Clemson's future.
It does. And, Dabo Swinney has always kind of, like you said, been able to hang with the big boys, but really hasn't found his place. But I really think in this situation, as far as the recruiting trail, he might be ahead of the game. I know that in this day and age, it's easy and it's the first instinct to go towards the portal. But I think Dabo Swinney really, still basing a lot of that young talent and what he's attracting and giving the opportunity. A lot of things we also heard was there's an opportunity to be an impact, an instant impact. And especially with these high school guys, some of these elite guys that we know have offers, they have 40 plus offers, they have their choice, their pick of the litter of where they could go play ball. But again, that's also under the understanding that they might not get to start or that they might have to wait it out. And a lot of these young guys, they don't want to sit and wait it out. And I think Clemson is presenting that opportunity. And I feel like in this one, that Dabo Swinney may be ahead of the curve, because I truly believe as much as the portal replenishes and fills an instant void, it doesn't fill the long-term void, because there's still so much turnover. Because again, unless you can get really lucky with a transfer that may have two years of eligibility, and then you also run the risk that they're not going to stay the 2 years of eligibility. So at some point, I believe that you have to take a chance and a gamble, and I like what Clemson's doing here. And I think that Dabo Swinney might be a little bit ahead of the curve. When everybody's out there trying to do the portal, look at Bill Belichick. They're going after that high school talent. So there's something in that Carolina water that's just a little bit different. But I know we don't have a lot of time, but I'm going to run down, because I'm not done with that Tiger intel just yet. Some of the other notable guys to watch, of course, Ryan Mosley, one of the coveted two-way players in the country out of Carrollton, Georgia. He was on hand, had nothing but great things to say about his experience. Of course, another kid that is someone to really watch, definitely has that DNA, that football DNA. NFL legend son, Larry Fitzgerald's son, Devin Fitzgerald, was on campus. He had a strong junior season with 13 games, 52 receptions, 720 yards, 9 touchdowns, 13 yards per grab. He's one of the kids to really watch. And again, we talk about these multiplayer sport athletes, but what I really like about Devin Fitzgerald, and I think that this is something that's happening in the Carolinas, is go recruit lacrosse players, because Devin Fitzgerald, NFL legend son, not only plays football, he plays basketball, and he also plays lacrosse. So again, he was on hand in Clemson this weekend. Another O lineman who really made a splash, who made a long trek out of Prosper, Texas. You've heard us a little bit talk about Prosper High School and some of the offensive linemen that they've really been able to produce. Well, Zayden Krempus made his way out to Clemson. He just talked about how incredible and how unique his visit was during his time there. He really appreciates what's going on there with Coach Swinney, and he said that the facilities and everything. He's another name to watch. Cannon Pickett was another top guy who didn't have an offer on hand, but like many of these guys that are interested in programs, they take a chance and say, hey, what does it hurt? And Cannon Pickett left Clemson, South Carolina, with an offer. Of course, if those of you don't know the Pickett family, his father is a legacy that played at Miami along with his brother Booker Pickett. So the Canes are very much still in the mix in this, and are very were said to be the heavy favorite in Cannon Pickett's recruitment. But again, Clemson has made a huge impact this weekend. So this is another one to watch to see how Mario Cristobal and his staff will try to keep double legacy Cannon Pickett, on their radar and with the Canes. Some other guys that were on hand, players to watch, Maxwell Riley, another 4-star. Ohio State is one of those teams that's really looking after it. And again, he said that he'll be back down in Clemson on March 24th. So again, that's going to be an interesting recruitment to watch. And one player that I really, really want to look at, Mark, rounding out, this Clemson list of high-profile recruits is Zion Giles. He is a guy that South Carolina has been taking a lot of push for, because he is the number 1 recruit in South Carolina out of Carver's Bay in Hemingway, South Carolina. And Clemson has made a big, big push. Of course, we know that South Carolina has made him priority, but after this visit, they definitely are going to go head to head with Clemson. Clemson really made a big push for the number 1 recruit in South Carolina. I wouldn't be surprised if not here in the so distant future, he earns that 5th star. Some other schools to watch outside of the state: Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida. I didn't get a chance to look at the list, but today Florida is one that we'll probably be talking about next week. They are having, of all days, a huge Tuesday when it comes to hosting recruits. Again, kudos to Clemson. For Rebel fans, this is a name you probably know and know it well, Matt Luke. He has done a heck of a job in recruiting some of the best linemen to Clemson, and it definitely showed this weekend. He's always been one of the top under the radar assistants in the country. But again, Matt Luke, Dabo Sweeney tag teaming to bring some of the best offensive guys, especially those tackles, those interior linemen, out this weekend. So again, a huge, huge weekend in the Carolinas. I could go on and on and on, but like I said, I know that we're running short on time. But again, a huge weekend in the Carolinas. Not only is Bill Belichick, but Dabo Sweeney really looking to build on that young talent, but it was all about the big guys up front on the offensive and defensive line. But again, there's something in that Carolina water, so it'll be exciting to see the shift in dynamic. And I'm sure that this will not be the last. We'll be talking not just about the Bill effect, but also that Clemson effect with Dabo Sweeney in South Carolina.
Yeah, so we are here on the move each and every Tuesday with all of you. This is our portal and recruiting update show with LeeAnn Herring, again, every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. So please join us live. And we are off to do our Ole Miss show. And I know LeeAnn's got some notes on some Ole Miss offers and some in-state prospects there in Mississippi that we can run down in the next hour. So follow us to the Ole Miss show live at 2 p.m. Eastern, and that's typically on Wednesday, but this week, right after this show here. LeeAnn, anything else we need to know before we move on?
Well, we were supposed to cover some Under Armour buzz this weekend, but we'll save that for next week. But tune into the Ole Miss live show, because like Mark says, we got a couple guys in the SIP that we're representing. So we'll take it over to the Ole Miss live show. And of course, we have some upwards with a North Alabama transfer that's on the move and definitely on the rise. So join us again next Tuesday. We'll definitely have more buzz. We will be on the move, and we will be hitting OT7, the debut weekend. We will be in the next 4 weeks in the Dallas Metroplex covering that. So we're looking forward to bringing you all the latest from OT7 for the next couple weeks. So tune in next week.